Welcome to We Left the Nest with Robert,
and Melissa,
redefining us.
Join us as we share our personal stories of love and loss, navigating hard times, and the joy that comes with growing up together.
Listen in for inspiring and relatable discussions that remind us all of the power of love and resilience in the journey of life.
We'll explore our past and talk about what we've learned over the last 25 years.
We're diving deep into the beautiful chaos of life, including marriage, family, raising kids, and the challenges that come up.
With sprinkles of lighthearted laughter to keep things fun, get comfy while we engage in
Candid conversations with no reservation. Episode 2.
Episode 2, here we are.
Episode 2 of We Left the Nest.
Yes.
We're going to go into children, having them, how great it is to make them.
We're not talking about how great it is to make them. That's not part of this
naming
episode.
them
Naming
is
them.
important, though.
Naming them is important. For sure. Naming them is important. It's a large task. It's a heavy burden because you are choosing the name that this human will have for their existence here on Earth.
Similar to the difficulty in naming a dog, like your puppy here.
No, not quite like that. I feel like it's easier to name a dog.
This is Rebel.
This is Rebs.
8 months old.
Rebs. She took her sister's spot, and her sister Raina is pouting on the ground.
This is our 4th or 5th attempt at this episode, so we're going to hope that we can get some things done.
And there she goes. She doesn't stay for long.
So she'll get down, and then Raina will jump up here soon.
She doesn't like to be near the blankets and people for too long because she gets hot. She's got some husky in her, and so she doesn't like to be too snuggled up for too long.
Right,
But
so
Raina will now take her spot. Raina was in the last episode, and this is where she prefers to be, next to mom or dad on the blanket.
5 years old.
She's a 5-year-old girl. She's a 5-year-old girl. These are our kids now.
Also, very difficult to name.
No.
Yeah.
No, you picked her name, and you picked it out very quickly. You were no help in picking the children's names.
What do you mean I was no help?
Because you were just a vetoer.
I feel like as the male in the relationship, I immediately removed half of the names.
We're not doing that again. No, you didn't.
I did, because,
you didn't choose that. No, you didn't. We went over this. You did not choose whether or not you were going to shoot an X or a Y chromosome. Scienced, and that was decided.
I can't get credit here for anything.
No credit.
Fine. Anyway.
I gave you credit
so
for naming her.
So you needed to come up with a name, so you went on to Google and you were like...
No, I didn't go on to Google because Google may have existed then, I don't know, but it wasn't as helpful as it is nowadays. You can't just type in a few words and have it pop up a list with AI-generated names. You were looking through a book that was like this thick. That was full of baby names. It was the baby name book. And
so you would get a bunch of names.
Page by page turning them.
You'd get a bunch of names, right?
Right. I would go through them page by page, writing down names I liked, and then I'd bring it to you.
Because you had nothing better to do. I mean, you were just sitting around pregnant anyway.
Absolutely. It wasn't like I was working a job, 40 hours a week, saving money, preparing to have a baby. That wasn't happening at all. Yeah, and so then I'd come to you with name ideas, and you would be like, no, pew, 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 pew.
How was that not helpful,
Again,
though?
shooting things.
How is that not helpful, though?
It's not helpful because you had no input. You didn't give a suggestion as to something else. You wouldn't say why you didn't like a name. You wouldn't say, what type of name you wanted, what letter you would want to start with, how many syllables you would want.
So this is similar to like when I would ask you what you want to go eat, and you would say it doesn't matter, you go ahead and choose. And so I'll say, okay, let's do Thai food, and you'll say,
I would say yes to Thai food.
Tonight.
I would say yes to Thai food.
Or I'll say burgers, and you'll say, well, we just had burgers a couple nights ago.
We haven't had burgers in a while.
I'll say pizza. And
I understand your point. But why are you only suggesting eating out,
What do you mean?
Like, why aren't you saying something we can make? You're saying Thai food, burgers, pizza.
Young people like to eat out a lot.
We're not young people
We
anymore.
were young people.
We were young people,
would
but we
eat
also
off-
didn't have the money to eat out.
We would eat off of the dollar menu a lot.
Yeah, that's true. Dollar menu really was $1 back then.
Taco Bell tacos were like 59 cents or something.
But regardless, you still were not helpful in the name process. We narrowed it down.
Because I...
We narrowed it down by you shooting everything down.
Heavy veto...
Of everything. 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 So we already had a middle name. We knew the middle name was going to be James. That was a family name on both sides, on your side and on my side. And we wanted the middle name to have significance behind it. Your grandfather and my grandfather were both James. My brother was James. My uncle was James. It's a family name.
Okay, so then we had 2 names left on the list.
Yes.
We had Zachary,
Yes.
and we would call him Zach.
Right.
And we had Alexander,
Yes.
and you want to just call him Alex.
Yeah, I like the name Alex. I think we had a girl's name. Yeah, we did. Because the girl's name was Alexis, and we would call her Alex for a girl or a boy. But then we found out it wasn't a girl anyway.
Thanks to me. So...
Yeah, thanks to you. So, I was like, Alexander, I like that one. I like Alex. And you were like, okay, but if
you're going to call him Alex, why not just name him Alex? Why mess with the Ander?
It's a novel idea.
Get the Ander out of here.
Yeah. So, he's Alex. Alex James Cole. He was born in May of 2000. And then in January of 2001, was it January? No, it wasn't
April.
January. It was April. In April of 2001, we found out we were pregnant again.
I think she found out before I did.
I
Pretty
did.
sure.
I didn't know that I was pregnant I found out in April that I was pregnant, and I was due in July. I was due July 4th. And I had just obviously had our son. And you hear different things from different people, but I didn't have my mom around a lot during that time. We were just kind of starting to mend our relationship because Alex, when he was about 6 months old, we actually found out he was born blind in his left eye. And that's actually when my parents started talking to me more. I feel like it was a neutral ground where we were both wanting the best for him, and it gave them a reason to kind of... I feel like in my family, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but basically, like, instead of actually addressing issues, we don't talk about them or don't talk to each other for a while, and then when we do come back together, we just don't talk about it. So all of the stuff that had happened with me getting pregnant and all of the things, which probably that whole episode will be another time when we talk about that conversation. But that was just kind of looked past because now we all are going to focus on him figuring out what's wrong with him, because at that point we weren't sure exactly. And so they were talking to me again, but we weren't super close. And so I was just going based off of what other people told me. There were people that said you can't get pregnant when you're breastfeeding. There were people that saying you can't get pregnant while you're on the mini pill and you're breastfeeding and all these things. And I was breastfeeding and I was on the mini pill. And then in January I had a week or so that I thought was a period, which I guess
those
was just
things,
spotting.
by the way, are not true.
Those are not true. We found out they're not true. And so when I actually took a pregnancy test was when I felt movement. And I was like, well, I know what that is because I have been pregnant before. So we went to the doctor and she asked when my last period was, and I told her January. And she was like, well, let's do an ultrasound just to gauge it. And she was like, no, this is a much larger baby than that. So by measurement, I was given the due date of July 4th, and that was in April. So in 3 months.
How did that happen?
I don't know. It just kept happening to us.
2 times that happened.
2 times. And we're like, what the heck?
I'm sure the process is enjoyable at least.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
And we still don't get to talk about that?
No, we're not talking about the process. Yeah, that's not for here. So then we were tasked with naming another child. another child. And I feel like we had just crossed that bridge and done that like
I had
11 months before
here.
that.
I had some really good input. We did find out that this was going to be a girl.
Yes, that day.
So once again, I've ruled out half of the names. Yay me.
Attaboy.
It's putting in work.
High five.
More ways than one.
Thanks.
So
Appreciate
then
it.
I thought it would be cool, if we handed down your family name as her middle name.
That's absolutely not what happened.
What do you mean?
I always wanted to pass on my middle name to my daughter. Since I was a little girl, I wanted
to pass on the other
pass
name.
on my middle name. And your mom actually approached me when she found out we were having a girl, because your aunt at the time she was 20 years older than me, so she was 38. And she was the last girl on your side of the family, on your mom's side of the family, until now when we were going to be having a daughter. And so she asked if I would pass down her middle name because it was a family name. And it just so happened that her middle name was also my mom's middle name. And so I felt like, well, we gave Alex both of our grandfather's names. Why don't we give our daughter, I almost said the name.
I will say that you got to have a heck of a lot of kids to pass down all the names that people will want you to pass down.
That's true. And had it not been a name that I liked, I probably would have passed on it. But because it was both of our mother's middle names, I felt like it had more meaning than my middle name. Like
super basic middle name also.
So Marie. So we knew the middle name was going to be Marie. And so now the process of finding a first name began.
I don't remember this process, so this part's going to be new to me when she starts telling it.
You don't remember the process?
No,
it was the same process that we did with Alex.
That's a good process.
Where I would bring you names and you would say no. No, 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 no. The one I really, really liked was Jillian. And you were like, absolutely not.
Jillian doesn't sound like a bad name.
I liked that name, and you said no. And there was another name. I don't remember.
We could ask her if she wants to change her name.
She does not. I've told her that before, and she's like, ew, Jillian.
She said it like that?
She did not. Probably not like that in that tone. But she was not impressed with that name. So it's probably better that you vetoed that one. So then we settled on Katrina.
We did?
We did. You agreed to that name.
I agreed to a name.
Yeah.
That must
So
have been
she
pulling
was
teeth.
Katrina Marie.
This was a missed opportunity to pass down your grandfather's name.
My grandfather's name?
Well, your dad's name.
Oh, my dad. Well, I don't know. Because it was spelled like the male version of Francis.
Yeah, but for the middle name, this would have worked perfectly.
Oh, yes, that's right. Because you wanted.
Because our last name is
Cole.
Cole, okay. So now it's
That's
Katrina
right. I forgot
Cole,
about this part.
Katrina Cole, but if her middle name is Francis, what would her initials be?
He wanted to give her a middle name that started with F. I forgot about that part. He thought it was so funny because she would be KFC. Ha ha ha.
That is pretty funny.
So funny. No. I vetoed that. I was like, absolutely not. Because that's the other thing about naming a child. You're not just thinking of a name that they have to have for the rest of their lives, and a first name and a last name that sound good together, and a first name and last name that sound good with the middle name, but you also have to look at the initials, right? Like,
I was
you
looking
have
at
to
the
be
initials.
careful for what the initials are going to be for your child. And
now that I think about it, having a daughter named KFC, when KFC's slogan...
Is we do chicken right?
No, the other older one.
What was it?
The finger-licking good one. You don't want to be the dad to a daughter in high school dealing with that. The reflection, hindsight is 2020.
Yeah.
All right. So
well,
when I reflect on this now,
is 2010. So.
When I reflect on this now, I can see how that would be bad.
Yeah, well, it was bad then.
No, well,
whether or not that was their slogan. Is KFC We Do Chicken Right? Is that them now?
It's one of their slogans.
Okay.
I think.
Anyway, that was a big veto for me. I was like, no, we're not giving our daughter a middle initial.
I had to allow her
middle
to
name
veto
of F.
something, I guess.
So now we had Alex and Katrina. Katrina was born in July of 2001. They were 13 and a half months apart. Almost exactly.
13 and a half months. Man.
Yeah.
There's just no downtime there.
Rewind way back. I mean, not too far back, but before that, my mom has 5 children. And my older sister and my sister directly younger than me we have 13 months between us. So my older sister's 13 months older than me. My younger sister directly younger than me is 13 months younger than me. So
you were just copying your parents. Got it.
Guess I was just like, hey, this was fun. Let's try it.
You know.
So anyway, after that, we decided, okay, 2 kids is probably good right now. And we figured it out. We figured out what was causing it. And we were able to stop that from happening for some time.
Mm.
And if it were up to you, we would have been done. Like, you didn't want more children. When Katrina was about 2.5 or so, I wanted to have a 3rd child. Now, mind you, we now had purchased our own home. And we're living in Vallejo in our own home with the 2 kids. And you were working full-time nights at the grocery store. We went over that in the last episode. And I was like, all right, well, I'd always wanted 3 kids. And so I wanted another child. And I asked you about it. And you're like, no. Why would we have another kid? Like, we have 1 for each of us. That's what you told me.
That's fair.
You said we have 1 for each of us.
Fair.
It's like, what do you mean 1 for each of us? Like, well, yeah, if we go out somewhere, like 1 for you and 1 for me. And I was just like,
nobody's left out. Nobody's like stranded. You know, we're not struggling. How do you split up 1.5 kids? You know, it just works out.
So anyway, it took some convincing. But you finally agreed to try for a 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So how long did we wait for that?
Well, we tried right away.
I mean, but how long after Katrina?
She was about 2.5.
Okay.
I think they're 3.5 years apart.
And we settled that this was going to be the last one.
No, maybe he was born in 2004. Yeah. Yeah, this was going to be the last one. I wanted 3 kids, and that was it. Like, I was done after 3. But do you remember?
I probably do. If we're talking about the making of the kids, that's the part I remember.
You don't remember that. You don't remember making a child.
Those are good times.
You don't remember it. Not that many years ago, for sure. But do you remember when we decided to have...
Hold on, I was thinking about something else.
I probably shouldn't even share this on here.
We decided to have the other kid. And so...
Do you remember?
We were like, okay, we're going to take a single shot at this and see if it works.
There was no we about this.
It was a group decision.
No, it was not a group decision. You were like, we're going to try 1 time this month and see if I can get it in 1 shot.
That didn't work, by the way.
Anyway.
Which means the next month was way more enjoyable.
You really did do that. You really was like, I just want to see if we can do it 1 time. And I wanted to have a baby in April. I wanted a baby in my birthday month. And
well, we're starting too early for that.
We were close. Yeah, and I didn't know how long it would take, so we tried, Anyway, next month it worked. So
what a great month.
I got pregnant with Ethan.
Because you got pregnant, obviously, that's why.
I said his name before I talked about how we were going to name him.
Okay, so how did we go to name him?
So same process. I went to you with the names. I wanted to name him after my dad. I wanted to name him Kevin. And you were like, absolutely not. We were, 3 years. This was 2000. He was born. So this was 2003. So we were 3 years out from Alex being born and that whole thing, and it wasn't really mended at that point. There was no way this guy was gonna let us name Ethan after my dad. And he was like, well, let's name him after my dad.
Now let's keep in mind, we were in no position to have to take up all the family names.
No.
Because
we were the very first.
We were the first of her pack of 5.
And we were the oldest cousins and grandchildren.
To have kids. So it wasn't like there were not going to be people after us that could just take up the mantle on any names left behind. In fact, it would have even been greedy of us to take more names.
Yeah. Well, we weren't going to have more kids, so we knew this was our last one.
But it would have been greedy because we had already done
so many
family, so it was just nicer for us to leave that for other people.
Yeah.
So that's why we didn't go with Kevin.
That's right. We did not go with Kevin. And so he wanted to name him after his dad, but his dad's first name was Perry, and I wasn't in love with that. And his middle name was Richard. So we went with Richard for the middle name. Because then we hadn't really done anything on his mom and dad were divorced for a long time. And so we hadn't really done anything like a nod to like your dad's side of the family. So we decided, well, I mean, I guess with James, because that was his name. I was wondering when you were going
to figure that part out. But it was fine. It was 2 separate instances here. So we went with Richard. And then how did we decide on Ethan?
Well, for a long time, you had agreed to Devin. Because I really wanted to, like, get something in there for my dad. Because we were doing Richard Evan, for your dad. So we were going with Devin because it was like Kevin, which is my dad's name, but Kevin was my dad. So it was Devin. So dad plus Kevin is Devin.
Okay. Feels like Evan and you just added a D. That's really what.
But you had agreed on that. So, like, for a long time... I
don't know how you convinced me on that.
For a long time, I was referring to this baby as Devin, pregnant with this child, and Devin.
For your other pregnancies, were you able to refer to them in the womb as their name, or did we wait way too long to come up with their names for that?
It definitely was later in the pregnancy.
To be clear, I'm not required to remember this.
It was later in my pregnancies because we found out later into the pregnancies that I was pregnant. And
so we finalized the name much sooner. And then what you thought was the final name, we swapped it out.
Well, I started much sooner with this pregnancy one because I knew that we had planned it. And, like, I was taking tests, like, early until, like, I got the faintest line and was like, I'm pregnant. But also I knew how long this process would take. And so early on I started girl and boy names. I don't even remember what the girl name was. But once we found out he was a boy, because we found out with all 3 of them
what they were going to be. When we found out he was a boy, boom, I ruled out half of them right then.
Yeah, let's get you a trophy. So anyway.
You're my trophy.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay. So after a while, I don't know, I got towards the end of my pregnancy and I was just like, I don't like this name anymore.
Sounds like something that somebody pregnant would say.
Didn't like it. It didn't feel right. It didn't sound right. I guess if I'm being completely honest, it never felt right. It was like I was trying to make it fit.
Yeah, you're trying too hard. Obviously, with the Evan dad thing, I could have told you that 5 minutes ago when I heard this story.
Kevin and dad.
Kevin,
equals
dad.
Devin.
Okay.
Anyway, so it just didn't feel right. It's just like, this just isn't, it's just not, right, it's not going to be his name. And so then I don't even remember where I saw Ethan. At the time, Ethan wasn't a popular name, but apparently everybody giving birth to boys that year named their kid Ethan. Because in 3rd grade, he was in class with 5 other Ethans.
That seems like a lot of Ethans.
Not 5 other. He was one of 5 Ethans in the classroom. And they actually ended up moving some of them out. So I think there ended up only being 2 or 3. But, yeah, there were a lot of Ethans in 2004. So he was born March 2004. So now our kids are 24, 23, and 20 today, this minute in life.
And it's important that they got my name because we moved them way up in the alphabet for class.
Yes.
It's always nice when you're in elementary school to be further up in the alphabet. So they went up to C. And they were, she was an R.
I was an R. My childhood was full of trauma around that name at school, elementary school.
How could kids in elementary make fun of the name Rivard?
How could you do that?
How could you possibly do? We'll leave that up to you guys' imaginations there. All right, what else do we have on tap here?
Kids are so unkind. They can be so unkind.
I was trying to move
Traumatized by now. You brought me right back to the playground and to the mean girls.
I didn't say anything.
That called me Melissa retard.
Wow, you can't say that word. That word
I can't say it
now.
and using it. That is what I was called. It was the 80s and the 90s. Like that's the word. That was the word. That was the word you use. It's canceled now, but like that was the word, and that was what I got changed to. But not regardless of that. Just being an R in school kind of sucks. You're just so far down the alphabet, and they do everything alphabetically. Back then they did. I don't know what they do now, but back then it was just like you get a class roster, it's alphabetical. They call your names out. The teachers are like, "We need to do something with the kids. Let's do it off the roster." And then everything's alphabetical. Once in a while, you'll get that nice teacher that does reverse alphabetical order, and you're still a little ways in, right? But
that teacher was terrible.
Not as bad.
I wouldn't like those teachers.
So we named all of our kids, and then they started getting older, and we started having to figure out what parenting looked like for us. And pretty early on I learned that it wasn't spanking.
Right. We knew it wasn't going to be spanking.
Spanking didn't work for me. We did talk about this a little bit in the last episode, but we'll go a little more into depth about that. Is the day that I realized I didn't ever really my kids weren't like kids that needed to be corrected super often. And at the time when they were younger, I was actually helping my aunt who had a daycare. And it was really profound for me to be working side by side with her and see how she, dealt with behaviors. Because I didn't have a lot of experience raising kids, obviously. So it was nice to see, corrections implemented in a good way where it wasn't spanking. But needless to say, I was spanked as a kid. And so that's kind of what I started doing. But the day that I realized it wasn't going to work for me was when I was spanking Alex. I don't remember what he had done. I think I had asked him to do something and he was, not listening and being disrespectful and kind of sassy. And I said, if you do it again, you're going to get a spanking. And of course he did it again. And so I turned him over my legs and I was spanking him and he was laughing. And I was I remember Katrina on her bunk bed looking at me and she was laughing at the situation. I don't think I was capable of spanking him to the point where he actually cried. It wasn't working for me. But you were in the other room and you heard him laughing. You heard what was going on and you came in and you spanked him like a real spank that got his attention to turn back and look.
I'm 2.5 years older than her. So I would be spanked to like an inch of my life.
Also you had different parents than I did.
So to me, it was a little bit different.
Were you ever spanked with a belt?
Oh, yeah.
I was never spanked with a belt. I actually I remember only 3 times ever being spanked. Because I was terrified of getting spanked.
3 times? That's a week. What do you mean?
And these are things you would think, these are conversations we're having now that maybe you normally would have before you get married and before you have kids, but that didn't happen. And I don't even know if we've ever talked about that.
I got called in there.
I didn't call you in there. You came in there.
I basically had to go.
We had a very small house. We talked about this, like an 800 square foot house. He heard it happening. He shows up and he spanked him. And I remember Alex turning around one time, just one swat. And I remember Alex turning around and making eye contact with you and just crying. And you said, don't ever laugh at your mother like that, or something to that, like you need to
You
stop.
have to be serious in the moment.
I'm not laughing at the fact that it happened. I'm just like, the fact that
you're speechless still. This was 20 years ago.
It was, for me, I guess I'm laughing because I'm still uncomfortable. Like, it was traumatizing. Then I was just definitely.
I mean, yeah, you got bullied by a 6-year-old. It would be traumatizing.
He was not 6. He was like 4 or 5, maybe. Because Ethan was in the other room. Him and Katrina were still in that room together. So Ethan would have been 1.
Either way, you got bullied.
But he wasn't bullying me. He was misbehaving. He was testing boundaries. And nothing that I was doing was working. So I was like, well, I'm just going to spank you. And that didn't work for me. And that was the last time I ever spanked any of the kids.
It might have been the last time we spanked them.
Yeah, I don't think you had ever spanked them. I think this was like the first and the last time. I don't remember spanking them. They don't have memories of being spanked.
It wasn't really a thing we wanted to do anyway.
Mm-mm.
We were at that middle ground of parenting, you know. Now you don't even talk sternly to your kids. You hope that they do what you tell them to do. And, you know, we were brought up with a lot more strict
corporal punishments.
Yeah, it was a lot more strict for us, and stepping out of line was a lot easier to do when we were growing up, because my parents, most parents at that time were not very lenient on the rules there.
I feel like parenting in our generation was fear-based. Being afraid of your parents, being afraid of what might happen, you know, like they put what did they say? That's the saying, they'll put the fear of God in you or something like that. Like,
well, you got I brought you into this world.
I'll take you out. Like, I mean, these are lines that like were uncommon then, right? And so most people go with what they know, right? Like, this is how we were raised, so this is obviously like how you do it. I mean, that's definitely, we've broken the mold since then. That's not really how parenting is today. But then it was, and so we were really just trying to figure out what parenting looked like for us.
And really, if you think about it, with how infantile the internet was at the early 2000s and everything else, there wasn't a lot of resources on trying to break the mold on how you were parented. So
yeah, it was books.
We kind of just did this thing and hoped it worked out.
Well, and like I said, I was working helping my aunt with her daycare, and she modeled a lot of like redirecting and timeouts and, you know, explaining why, you know.
But it wasn't like we could go get resources on this, you know, like you had to, you saw what you saw in your limited hours there.
Yeah.
And then we just tried to make that more of what it was. And one of the important things was that you never want your kids to be scared to talk to you.
Yes.
So you have to be really careful, in my eyes anyway, you have to be really careful about punishing a child for something that they let you know that they did.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, if like inadvertently we would have told on ourselves as kids, we would have just gotten a straight punishment.
Yeah.
But we never really had conversations about it, but creating a safe space for our kids is just something we both kind of ended up doing naturally, and wanting them to feel like they could talk to us if they needed to. I remember as my kids got older, I would always tell them, if you're ever in a situation where you're uncomfortable and you don't want to do something, just say, your mom won't let you. Just say, no, my mom said no, or my mom won't let me, and just use me as an excuse. I don't care if people think I'm mean or terrible or I don't let you do anything, but if you're ever in a place where you're uncomfortable, just let me know and I'll come get you or whatever. But also, because of the way that everything went down when I got pregnant and the way that my family reacted, not my aunts and my uncles and my grandmother were all very supportive in their own ways, but my immediate family, and the rejection I felt and the shame I felt and the guilt I felt and the gamut of emotions I went through on that, I wanted to make sure that my children never felt that they were less than anything because of something they did. I wanted home to be a safe space for them where they could come back from school or the world and know that when they were there, they were free to be who they were and express themselves and have a safe place to fall. And I wanted to work on creating that for our family. And I think that started when I realized I'm not a spanking person. Like, I don't want my kids to be scared of me. And I don't mean that in a way where they can just walk all over me. But I feel like far too many kids in my generation didn't feel like that their parents were a safe place, that they could trust them to say anything they needed to say without being punished in some way or being rejected or looked down on, or having disappointed them in some way.
And there's probably still a place for spanking depending on the situation, depending on how bad the children are being, how much they don't listen, the history of that whole thing. Maybe it is what gets through to certain children if used correctly and all that. But it just wasn't something that was going to work for us.
Yeah.
So we didn't.
No, we didn't. I don't remember. I think there was one time when where I just kind of like popped Ethan on the back of his head when he was younger. I don't know if he did something or said something. But I remember just
times
like
I got smacked upside the head.
Just like it wasn't a hard thing, but it was just like almost like a reaction. Like, why did you do that? And he was just it didn't. I don't even know if it made a smacking sound. Like, it was just kind of like, what are you doing? And just the look on his face, he was so heartbroken that I had, and it was because that's just not how we did, discipline with our kids. Yeah, but at the same time, they weren't bad kids. A lot of people say if you don't spank kids, they're never going to learn. And
there's other ways to make them learn.
Yeah. Ethan was really easy. So what we ended up kind of shifting doing is instead of like corporal punishment and hurting them, it was like not a reward system, but we would take away things that were important to them. So with Ethan, it was easy because it was his blanket. He was like Linus. He carried this blanket with him everywhere. When he first got attached to this blanket when he was an infant, I went and bought 3 or 4 other extras because I learned with the other 2 that they get attached to something and you want to have a rotation for laundering purposes. And all I would have to tell him is that, if you don't correct whatever it is, then I'm going to take your blanket. And that was it. It was... Yeah. So...
And that was that.
How was that? The computer died, and so we are restarting. But what I was saying is, with the other 2, I don't really remember what their price was, so to speak. What it was that I could take away from them that would really get their attention. I think it was pads.
They did have leap pads.
Yeah. The leap pads
They were kind of like tablets, but way before tablets were a thing. But it was like a little game type.
Yeah, there were little educational games on it that they could play. And they would only get so much time a day. But if I was having trouble with them, I would just, tell them you won't have your leap pad. And I'm pretty sure that worked for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was just finding their price, finding what it was that was important to them that was not worth whatever it was that they were doing to have it taken away. But I think that's what ended up working for us, which they're just kind of being consequences for their action instead of having to spank them. And it seemed to work for our kids. And I wanted to make sure that, like I said before, that it was a safe space for them to come home to. I didn't want them to ever feel like, if they did something wrong, that I would love them any less, or that they couldn't tell me that something happened. I remember Ethan came home in middle school. In middle school, I was sitting, waiting to pick him up, and he's walking to the car. Because I parked away from where everybody else was because I hated the traffic. So I was like around the corner and I make him walk to me. And I'm seeing him walk down the street. And he just looks like the look on his face is one of, I don't even know. I could just tell he'd had a rough day. Something was weighing on him. He wasn't feeling good about something. So he got in the car and, I asked him, what's going on, buddy? And he said, I got my progress report. And I said, yeah. And he said, I have 2 C's. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, are you mad at me? And I said, no. And he said, are you going to ground me? And I said, when have I ever grounded you? And he said, oh, his friend said that that you were going to ground me because I had 2 C's. And I said, didn't you say it was a progress report? And he said, yeah. And I was like, so you have time to get your grades up before you get your actual report card? And he said, yeah. And I said, I don't think I have to do anything. And he's like, what do you mean? And I said, I could tell by the look on your face as you walk to the car that you are disappointed in yourself. And I said, I don't think I have to do anything because I think that you know what you need to do to get your grades up and that you're probably going to work hard so that you feel better about your grade, aren't you? And he said, yes. And he got his grades up. Before his report card came out, he had B's and A's and he was very proud of himself. And I just felt like in that moment, instead of going, oh, you have to get this grade up and, things that you typically hear, you're never going to go far and how are you going to get into college with those grades and all these things that other people sometimes focus on, I could tell by the look on his face that he was doing all of those things to himself and I didn't need to say anything. And in that moment, he just needed to hear that I believed in him, right? And so it was creating that space for our family, for our home, that our kids knew that we believed in them and that we knew that they could do what they wanted to do and achieve their goals, and that it was always safe at home. It was safe if you were having a bad day and you wanted to be upset. It was safe if you were having a good day and you wanted to celebrate. I didn't want them to ever question what they were coming home to. Growing up, a lot of times I never knew if, mom and dad were going to be in a good mood or a bad mood. It probably depended on if they had their own business. It probably depended if they got paid that day or if they could make the bills that day. Or, there are a lot of times we were all home alone and they were at the print shop. And when they drove up, the anxiety over, is the house going to be too clean? Is the house not clean enough? We didn't clean the house at all, and not knowing how they were going to react when they came home was a real thing. And I didn't want that to be what walking into my home felt like for anybody. How about you?
I never got told that it was too clean. I don't know how that even comes up.
Okay.
How does that even happen?
I just mean like it wasn't clean enough.
You said too
I said
clean.
too clean. I didn't mean too clean.
It's too clean.
No, it's not. It's not clean enough, or it's too dirty, or which is the same thing. But I'm just rambling, basically saying I just wanted there was a lot of, I didn't even know until I started going down my own journey of healing and finding spirituality that a lot of that anxiety was created then, that I was anxious when my parents would get home because I never knew what we were going to get. It wasn't consistent.
Oh, that's part of the deal.
What's part of the
When
deal?
you grew up back then.
Yeah. I guess. And so I've tried really hard, that everybody that walks through the front doors of my home feels welcome and feels seen, and feels supported in any way that I can offer that for them. And I think that you've tagged along with me.
I was there for part of it, at least. At least part of it. I feel like.
I don't feel like we ever really had a conversation about any of this, but you've always been really good at supporting my crazy ideas or backing me up on,
Crazy ideas. Let's
Crazy
just keep
ideas.
going with crazy ideas. It's
Crazy
good.
ideas. But also, I feel like a lot of times in us raising the kids, you've kind of taken my lead. Or if something came up and we didn't really know what to do, you know, we would figure it out together, but not like in front of the kids either. Like I was always trying to make sure if we had to have hard conversations, it wasn't something that they saw. You know, when they got a little older and there was stuff we had to figure out.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into that once they get older. Mm-hmm. It's actually a lot easier when they're younger.
Yes, it is. It's so much easier when the problems are smaller as the kids.
So it's so easy because you go to work at night, and so you're not there while they're sleeping, and then you come home and you sleep during the day, and they have to be taken out of the house. So most of the time you don't even have to deal with them. So it's super
That's true.
easy.
I guess I did do a good share of the parenting on my own.
Super easy.
I guess you make a good point there. Yeah. I did a really good job raising our kids. I'm proud of myself. And you did a good job providing so I could stay home and raise them. I'm proud of you for that.
Mm.
What?
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't have done it if you weren't working to pay the bills. So...
They still want to ride all the amusement park rides with me anyway?
Oh, we're not. That's another podcast. We got to wrap this one up. We're going to do a whole episode, not another podcast, another episode on our family vacation to Disneyland.
Good times.
Not good times. So, yeah, I think that's good for episode 2. I hope you enjoyed it. We hope you enjoyed it. And
I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy the computer shutting down, but we managed to get through that.
I didn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed making the kids.
This is going to be... I want to end it with this. Not with that.
Oh, okay.
This is going to be a constant through all of these episodes. I just hope you guys get used to hearing that comment. If you could go back today as yourself at this age... would you have any advice for yourself 25 years ago?
Buy Bitcoin. Apple.
Okay.
Apple, and then into Bitcoin. Yeah.
Would you have any parenting advice?
Oh, parenting advice.
Like looking back at yourself then. Like remembering what it was like back then. If 45-year-old you could go back and say something to yourself, what would you say?
I'd probably be a lot softer. I think I was really harsh a lot of the time, and the way I talk and interact with people was not great for children, little children. I like to not sugarcoat things, so that's not good for little kids. They need things sugar-coated for at least a while. So that's probably the worst thing that I would say that I needed help with, because it doesn't make them feel good when you word things that way. But
yeah.
Hopefully I'll get some grandkids and be able to deal with that a different way.
That's so good. That's going to make me emotional.
You emotional?
That's
what
so
would
sweet.
you change?
What would I wouldn't change anything, but what would I say to myself?
Yeah, what would you say to yourself 25 years ago?
I would say to myself, I'm going to cry. I'm not going to cry.
Okay.
Because I still get emotional around this, because at that time, this is so stupid. I didn't believe that I was a good mom. So I think that I would tell myself that I'm a good mom. Because now I know I am. This is so... Can we edit this out?
No, we can't.
Yeah. Like... so silly. Oh, I just sucked the Kleenex into my mouth. Anyway.
I don't know what it's like to be a mom, let alone a teen mom. But I imagine there are not a lot of teen moms that get told by anybody that's important to them that they are doing a good job or that they're a good mom. I don't imagine that that's a term that gets thrown around a lot for younger mothers. And it's not necessarily whether it's a good job or a bad job. It's more that, moms in that position are trying their best. They're putting forth the effort, and there's nobody that tells them they're doing good. What happens a lot of the time, from what I've seen, is more criticism than anything else. Instead of you're doing good, you're trying hard, it's what you're not doing right in their eyes. Which doesn't even mean that you're doing it wrong. You're just not doing it the way someone else would do it. Because everybody older than you wants to give you advice on how you should parent kids when you're a teen mom. You're too young to have done this. Here's what you should do. And that doesn't make it right.
Yeah, I mean, and even nowadays, there's so much, like, mom shaming, even among adult, like, grown women who have kids. Like, there's so much mom shaming, but especially, like, when we had our kids 24 years ago, it still wasn't, like, fully accepted, it was still kind of looked down on, and there was this, like I don't know what word you would use, like a stereotype of what a teen mom was, and they were irresponsible, and that they didn't raise their kids, and that they were just on welfare. And from the time I got pregnant, I set out to make sure that we took care of our family, and that we didn't rely on family, and that we didn't rely on the government unless we needed to. And I don't think it was until I was like well into my 30s that I actually allowed myself to step back and look at how I had parented and, tell myself, like, I'm doing a good job. I don't know if I had heard it then, if I would have even believed it, So it's just something that I think I would go back and I would say, you're doing a good job and you're a good mom, and just tell myself.
What a heck of a time to look back in your 30s, though. When you had your first kid at 18, this means that your kids were starting to get to the age where they're dating, and they could end up in the position that you were in.
Yeah, they could. They could. And I was always open with the kids about the fact that I had them young. Obviously, they could do the math. So, but yeah, so that's what I would go back and tell
They were smart. They could do math.
So, yeah, I think that's good. That's a good episode, too. Thank you for joining us.
You waited until the second episode to cry, so that's good.
That's real good for me. But, I mean, you going back and saying what you said already started me getting emotional. Then when I had to answer the question, it was like, forget it.
She wasn't ready for that because she had never asked me that question. She had never asked me that question before.
No, I hadn't, and that's why I'm excited about this podcast we're doing, because it gives us the opportunity to do that. We have time, we don't have little kids, we're going back on what we've lived through, and I was just wondering what that would be. And thank you for honestly answering that, and not, I mean, we have to have some jokes, but like for actually looking back and thinking, what it is that you would say to your younger self. And I think it's beautiful, because I think that that's something that I can definitely see that's changed in you, where you've grown. And the fact that you said that hopefully you have grandkids one day that you can be softer with. It's like, oh, yes, thank you. I love you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for
Come
joining
back
us.
for episode 3 next week, because that's when we're dropping our next one. So, all right, bye.